are, after having celebrated our 150th anniversary on September 20th, getting ready to think about 150 years and more. It's an exciting time in the life of our church this month of October when we're considering our stewardship, the way we resource the church for its ministries in 2021. You know, we start here at this place because we remember how we weren't the first people in Arvada United Methodist Church to find ourselves in new and unusual times. Think back with me to a time that we may have mostly read only in the history books. 1929, the stock market crashed. All of a sudden, all of the resourcing and the way life looked changed as the country was thrust into the Great Depression. It was in 1929 where a dream from the pastor of Arvada Church at the time decided to build this short steeple because it needed to be balanced and there needed to be a sign to the community of Arvada that this church was here for its community. So in 1930, construction started on this part of the church building, which is now, of course, down in Old Arvada. And by 1931, this part of the church structure was completed for dedication. But here's the amazing thing. In 1931, the country was moving more deeply into the Great Depression, and by 1932, the church was $22,000 in debt. And by the time the end of the year in 1932 came, there was only $3.35 left in the church's budget. The church council had to decide to vote to turn off the heat and the furnace and the gas for that year. And there were many moments, as our history books tell us, of threatened foreclosure on the church building. Imagine how this excited, enthusiastic congregation at the time felt as they were enduring the Great Depression and as they were struggling with these financial realities for the church. And yet, just a year later, our church history tells us, through the work of the Ladies' Society and through the efforts of the congregation and the community that rallied around the Arvada Church, the church was drawn out of its debt. And there was only about $359.14 left in debt in just a year after the Great Depression. That tells us about the stamina and the strength and the courage and the faithfulness of a congregation that rallied in the most difficult of times to make ministry happen. Well, I'm here to tell you we haven't experienced that kind of a financial threat even through these COVID days, and yet so much of what we're experiencing right now is just as new and unusual and confusing as I'm sure those folks felt in the 1930s. And yet, throughout these COVID days, our congregation has remained steadfast and faithful in resourcing the ministry of our church through 2020. And we anticipate the congregation will continue to do that work for 2021. Throughout this month of October, you will receive a couple mailings from the church with an invitation to consider your financial stewardship. Now, we know that financial stewardship is not the only way we support the ministries of the church. The church actually continues not only because of our financial giving, but because of our giving of our time and our talents as well. And know that our congregation is vital and alive in the way that we are able to impact and make a difference in our community because of the time and the talents that our congregation gives as well. But in this October season, we have an opportunity to focus on our finances. And it's a weird year. It's a year when some of our families are finding themselves insecure in their jobs, insecure in their understandings of how work life works, with having to homeschool families and taking care of schedules that we never dreamt of before COVID. And yet we've continued to persevere in the resourcing of our church's ministry to the full extent through 2020. And we hope that with your generosity and with your faithfulness and sacrifice, we'll continue to resource the ministries of our church for 2021. So as you receive those mailings and pray over them and consider your gift for 2021, we ask that you think about stepping up your giving if it's possible in your household right now. looking at making one step up and growing towards a tithe, a 10% commitment to the resourcing of the ministries of this church, not only in our congregation, but also our community and our world. Some of the giving that I do and commit to the ministry of the church is the most exciting giving I do, because I know through the ministries of our congregation and what we will do together with God's help, we will be touching lives that I could never touch. We will be making impacts in communities that I could never do alone. That's why I tithe and commit my resources to the church, and I hope that you'll join me as well as we live and build on the legacy of faithfulness and generosity of this great congregation many, many years ago, and as we make a commitment to making sure that we will have a robust and a faithful and a generous ministry that will continue for the next 150 years. Thanks for joining me for our 150 Years and More campaign. I look forward to the fruits of our labors as we build on the faithfulness and the legacy of the congregation for which we are all a part.